According to Locke, we leave the state of nature because there are degenerate and vicious people out there who are messing with our stuff and messing with us. And so, in order to protect and preserve our life, liberty, and property, we join with like minded people and form a political community. In chapter 9, so he discusses this in chapter 9. He then goes on to discuss specific problems with the state of nature related to what I was just discussing, specific deficiencies of the state of nature. And there are 3 of these that he mentions. So one thing you might think is, well, look, I thought Locke, he said there was this law of nature that was binding even in a state of nature, and he didn't, even from the beginning, he never seemed to claim that everyone would always follow it. But, anyone could execute it and everyone could figure it out and anyone had the power to execute it. So doesn't that kind of take care of, the problems that Hobbes's state of nature runs into, where it's everybody just stealing and killing and acting viciously? Wouldn't the fact that everyone can figure out the law of nature and that everyone can enforce it, wouldn't that help ameliorate the situation? And what Locke is showing us in these 3 deficiencies is no, those 2 facts don't actually ameliorate the situation. All right. So what's the first deficiency? He claims that there's no established, settled, or known law in the state of nature. And so immediately you might think, well, I thought that was what you said. I thought you said there was, namely the law of nature. Isn't that an established, settled, known law? And what Locke wants to say is, no, it's not, because you have to think about it to figure it out. It might not take that much reflection, but it takes some reflection. And some people just aren't going to do that. And so they'll never think about it. And so they'll never know that the law of nature commands them not to harm another person's health or property or whatever, right? And so it's not known to everybody. Also, what he mentions is that people tend to be biased. And if this law of nature isn't stated directly and written down and obvious, right? People are going to be biased in their own favor and kind of think, well, yeah, maybe it applies to you, but not to me. It's not going to be settled and established for them as the law, right? Our self-interest, our own biases might lead us to ignore it or pretend that it's not actually the law or something like that, right? And so the law of nature can't really function as this kind of standard common law governing interactions between people. It's not established, settled, or known by everybody. That's one deficiency. Whereas when we leave the state of nature, right, the laws are established, settled, and known to everybody. Everybody knows that the United States has outlawed murder, that it's against the law to murder. It's against the law to steal, right? Those are established, settled, known laws. That's an advantage that the political community has over the state of nature. Laws can be established, settled, and known. Secondly, let's imagine that deficiency didn't exist. Let's imagine that everybody, in fact, knew the law of nature and people weren't going to be biased and so kind of ignore the law as it applies to themselves or things like that, right? And everybody knows you can't murder, steal, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. So let's say the first problem is not really a problem. Let's imagine it goes away. Well, Locke would say, there's another problem that you're going to run into. Even if everybody agrees about the law and it's established, settled, and known, and people aren't going to let their biases get in the way or whatever, there are no indifferent judges to execute the law, to punish violations of the law. I thought you said anybody could be a judge of the law of nature, Locke, and now you're saying there are no judges? I thought we had too many judges, if anything. So what's going on? Well, think of it this way. Let's say I steal an apple from you. Yeah. And we're in a state of nature and blah, blah. And, let's say, I don't know, somebody else is around. So I steal the apple from you, and there's a third person there. Let's say, I don't know, it's President Rooney, Joanne Rooney, right? Rooney's there. And so she sees me steal the apple from you. Okay. And we're in a state of nature. She's not my boss or anything. In this state of nature, we're all equal. And okay, fine. Locke is going to say, in that situation, when I've stolen the apple from you and Joanne Rooney's just sitting there or whatever, minding her own business, but she sees the whole thing go down, there's no indifferent judge. Why not? Well, you, the victim of the crime, you have the power, the right, the jurisdiction to punish my violation of the law. And you are interested in doing so. You'd like to be the judge in this case. The problem, however, is you are not indifferent. You are going to be biased against me. You are going to think, so let's say you became the judge in this case. You were the judge in this case. What would you rule? According to Locke, you would probably rule for an excessive punishment. You would rule, you stole my apple, you have to give me my apple back, and I get to, chop off your head or whatever, right? I get to, and you die. You get the death penalty, capital punishment for stealing apples. I can't abide by this, right? You're going to overestimate what the punishment should be. You're not indifferent. You're not going to be a very good judge because you were personally affected, victimized by my transgression of the law of nature. Well, okay, I would be interested in being a judge too, right? But I'm going to suffer from the opposite problem. I'm going to underestimate what I should do, what the punishment should be. So let's say I was the judge. I would say, well, it's not that bad. Maybe I'll take half the apple and you take the other half, and we'll call it even and I'll leave or whatever, right? Well, that's not appropriate, right? That's your apple. You have a right to it, right? And so I might try to underestimate because I was the perpetrator. I'm the one who's being punished. I'm going to underestimate the kind of punishment that I should get. I'm going to say it should be lesser than it probably actually should be. Well, okay, fine. So the two parties to the dispute, they're not going to be indifferent, right? They both have a very strong interest in how the punishment goes. Okay, fine. Well, what about Joanne Rooney sitting over there? Maybe she would be indifferent, right? She doesn't care. So she would be able to give the proper judgment. And Locke would say, yeah, that's true. But what does she care about any of this? She's not going to want to get involved in all this. She's not going to be a judge. She doesn't want to judge this, right? Get involved in our business. She's got no interest in that. And so, yeah, she would be indifferent, but she doesn't care to judge. So she's just not going to be a judge. You and me, we're not going to be indifferent. We'll be judges, but we're not going to be indifferent. Some third party would be indifferent, but they don't have any interest in being a judge. And so there's no indifferent judge for violations of the law of nature. Yeah, anybody, any three of us has the right, the power, and the jurisdiction to enforce the law of nature, but none of us will be indifferent judges. That's a second problem. Whereas when you go to a political community, right, we have the whole legal system. We have the courts and judges there and juries and so on. And they're arranged such that they will be indifferent and that they obviously will be judges. And so there's another deficiency of the state of nature that is remedied in the political community. Last, let's imagine that we could find an indifferent judge. Right? Let's imagine that Joanne Rooney agreed. Right? She was sitting there minding her own business. She says, oh, okay, fine, whatever. I'll come over. I'll be the judge. And okay, so I believe in the scenario I was telling, I stole your apple. And so she comes over and says, here's the punishment, Jeff. You give the apple back, and the person you stole the apple from, they get to, I don't know. They get to slap you in the face to make sure you don't do it again, or something. You have to give them the orange that you have in your backpack or something, right? And so there's not only do you give the apple back, but you pay a little bit more, or something like that. That's typically how punishments go to try to deter any kind of future infraction. Okay, so say Joanne Rooney agrees to be the judge and she rules that way, right? So Jeff, you give You give the apple back, you get slapped, and you give the orange, right? And then we'll call it fair. That'll be a fair punishment, and that'll ensure that you won't do this again. Well, the third problem is that there's very little power that anyone has to execute punishments. Joanne Rooney and you, the victim of my apple theft, um, don't have power to execute the punishment, the penalty. I might just run away, right? So Joanne Rooney comes up and says, "Hey, here's the punishment. Do this, Jeff." And I say, "Okay, nope, bye," and I just take off, gone. And let's say I'm really fast. I don't know. Joanne Rooney looks like she could probably run pretty fast, but let's say I'm even faster. I don't know. And so I just book it out of there. I'm gone. I'm gone. I didn't get punished, and I have your apple. Which, shoot, right? Well, that's no good. Yeah. Even if we had an established settled known law, even if we could find indifferent judges, it'd still be very difficult to execute the punishments. Contrast that with the political community, where we have a kind of police force and jail system and whatever, and the court system. It's not hard to execute the penalties. We can take people into custody, and we can ensure, and we can track people down and whatever, and ensure that violations of the law are punished accordingly, right? And so these are three specific deficiencies that the state of nature suffers from that make it a good idea to leave the state of nature and start a political community.